I think it's important to investigate what you know so far before you add anything from someone else, and just kind of clarify where you are at with all of this. So if you feel comfortable sharing, does anyone feel comfortable saying why you think we study the mind? Yeah.
I think everything happens in the mind. Everything created in the mind, because I think so in my mind. So if I study the mind, I don't have to act upon, let's say, urges, or if some kind of emotion arises, so I don't need to exactly the same, to act on this emotion. I think, for me at least, it makes me feel compassion, like more connected in a way, to others, to myself.
So because
It's a good thing.
yeah, it's a good thing because so Sigel is saying that because everything comes from the mind, that knowing about these inner workings helps you, one, have some control, and two, have some compassion. Yeah, basically, yeah. So I think that that's spot on, right? That's quite right. That's one of the big reasons why we study the mind, probably the main reasons, right? To be able to get some control over it, and also to have some compassion for other people. Because I think a lot of our frustration with other people is an impatience that they don't learn their lessons well. Right? You're like, don't you know that already? Don't you know better than to do that already? What is wrong with you? Why do you do that? Yeah, when we're frustrated and angry, those are often the words in our head. But if we understand the way the mind works, we realize that our behaviors are the result of habit. Yeah, and the beginning of a habit made sense at the time, because ours did. But what it made sense to was ignorance, hence the trouble. Right? And so when you're really understanding that negative behaviors are born from a place of confusion and misunderstanding, and then the more you do them, the easier they become, because the nature of all things is they're easier when they're repeated. And so, of course, we act against our own best interest, and we hurt each other, even when we don't mean to, because there was a time and a place where that behavior made sense. Yeah, so it does. It opens up some compassion. And it also opens up some patience for you as an individual when you realize your intellectual understanding will go way ahead of your behavioral change. You'll understand things clearly much before you're actually able to do anything about it, and that that's normal. It's a good thing to know. Otherwise you think, I know better, why haven't I changed? Yeah, and it's like, of course, you know better, but you don't know better often enough. Yeah, often enough, repeatedly enough, on purpose enough for it to rewire you. Yeah? Yeah, did you have any other thoughts about why we study the mind, or why you personally study the mind? Tal?
I think that as deeper as you go, and as further as you understand the mind, and the further that you're able to create, equalness or equanimity, and you don't fall to the right or to the left, your judgment becomes, much better. And I think that the influence on other people as a result makes them more...
balanced?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, so it sounds like Tal is saying that that understanding the mind really helps with equanimity. Yeah. And it really helps with also encouraging that equanimity to come out of other people. The more you're in a balanced place, the more that becomes a condition for other people to be in a balanced place. As much as they're able, right? But we all do know that we're influenced by each other, and that when you're with a grounded, balanced person, you are much less likely to be your reactive version. Right? You're much more likely to be your rational self and your kind self when you're with someone who is also like that. Yeah, but I mean, even think about the different ways in which we talk about something like politics, depending on who we're talking to. Right? We can become really quite objective and balanced and intellectual, and oh yeah, I can see the other side's point of view, and yep, I can see why that would make sense to them, and gee, I have a lot of compassion for them for coming to that view, and yep, let's just find ways to build bridges. with some friends, right? And then with some friends we're like, how dare they? What is wrong with them? They're so different. They're so deluded. And we get, very us and them. And it's the same kind of general political beliefs, but depending on who we're with, dictates a lot of how much afflictions are present in that conversation, right? So I think it's important to have this view of we are influencing others. We understand that we get influenced by others, but if we take responsibility for our influence on other people, the first benefit is to you, yeah? Because you're happy and balanced. But if you're also thinking that I can bring out the best in people or the worst in people, it actually puts a productive kind of pressure on you. The kind that can nip laziness in the bud. Do you know what I mean? If you realize I'm a part of this dynamic and I could kind of lower the conversation or I could lift it, it really does change how you are with each other. Yeah. And it also changes the way you are in yourself. And all of that relies on understanding the way the mind works. Yeah. Yeah, anyway, did you have any other ideas about the mind or any, I forgot why, now why am I here? No.
Mahesh used to say, the mind is the boss.
The mind is the boss.
So easy to remember.
Yep, the mind is the boss, therefore you must get to know him. No? Tell me. What did you say?
Well, it's so easy to remember. It's so easy to forget.
Yes, easy to remember, easy to forget. And if you have a good relationship with the boss, life is easier, isn't it? Yeah. Right, in all ways. Yeah. It's the tool to develop our bodhicitta, exactly, right? It's the source of the highest development that we want and the highest benefit that we want to give others. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're a human being, and the only thing you can pay attention with, and the mind is not fixed like once used to think.
Yep.
So it's workable.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we start, the minute we start, although it's very gradually,
Yep.
we have consequences.
Yep.
And we can see the consequence almost in everything.
Absolutely. We see the consequence of what our mind is doing. Yeah.
Like with the body, we know exactly what to put in
Yeah.
and what not to put in.
Yeah.
And in the mind, if we don't work with it, we don't know what
Exactly.
knowledge we.
Yeah, I think you're right. Exactly. I think the body is a really good analogy. Yeah, we know what we should put in the body and what we shouldn't. And if we put the wrong thing in the body, we know we have no one to blame but ourselves, right? And we know if we don't feel well, it's because we ate the wrong food. But the same is true of the mind, isn't it? If we're putting the wrong food in the mind, yeah. Exactly, yeah, and they're all related. Absolutely. And it is true that, here we are with a human body and a human mind, or a human brain anyway, that our mind operates through, that we need to use it, right? Animals are a little bit simpler and they cause less trouble, but they also don't know how to develop beyond where they started, besides achieving basic needs. Yeah, we have this amazing opportunity to actually grow and develop, and if we don't use it, it's really a shame, it's really poignant, to have this amazing gift and then just kind of chuck it in the garbage heap. Because who knows when it will come again. Yeah, if it will come again, So it's having the right kind of pressure and the right kind of gentleness, the right kind of intense scrutiny on yourself, without it being a piercing, judgmental gaze. Yeah? Do you know how to have this kind of introspection that looks inside and watches what you say to yourself and why you say what you say to yourself, without getting defensive and making excuses, but also without beating yourself up and punishing? Yeah, a balanced introspection is what we're wanting to bring to each moment, where we can hear what we say to ourselves as if we were listening to our best friend ramble on and on. Yeah, if you were listening to your best friend, you would say, okay, some of those things are not useful. Oh, that's quite useful. Yeah, nice one. That's boring, right? But we wouldn't have like a meanness with it. Yeah, and to start to hear ourselves with that gentleness, but not disassociated, like everything I say is fine. Yeah, not passive. Yeah. So we study the mind for a lot of reasons, but the main one is really if you don't study the mind, you don't understand what is happening to you. If you don't study the mind, you can't take control over what is happening to you and from you. Yeah, life feels more random. Yeah, feels like there are more coincidences and that you're a victim of circumstance. Yeah, or that someone is manipulating you from above. Right. So studying the mind is essential for all transformation. And so we study it from an objective perspective, unrelated to ourselves as an individual. And then we bring it to ourselves as an individual. And then we bring it into what is our daily life doing. But if we can do it kind of objectively, of here are the general things about all minds, then we can talk about it without being too triggered. Yeah, without our defensiveness getting triggered, without feeling like we're good or bad people. We just kind of getting to know the structure of the mind. And so were some of you at the course on low rig that Geshe-ma gave recently? A couple of you went to the low rig? Didn't she teach low rig? Geshe-ma. Geshe-ma. Only just the one. No. Did some of you do the mind weekend? Often, yeah, often. Yeah, him, yes. Nobody went?
I think they're teaching the same day. I wanted to go, but
No, we changed the retreat, remember? Because it was going to conflict.
You actually said that you're going to go to that.
Yeah, I was. And then my mother came and, big balagan. My mother, who is beautiful and lovely in her own teaching. Okay.
YouTube, I think.
Oh, yeah. So I guess, anyway, so since you weren't there, then I'm not going to review what you've learned. I'm going to give you new things. But basically, if you can realize that this is a really vast teaching that I can only give you an overview of because we just don't see each other enough. And what you need is a resident teacher. Yeah, and so create the cause for a resident teacher by being really good friends with each other and supporting each other and being very kind and generous, because a Dharma center is one of the most precious things in the world. It really is. And then you can invite a teacher to come and stay and teach you whatever you want with continuity and consistency, and you can ask them questions. So just in the back of your mind, know this is a huge topic, and knowing a little bit is very useful, actually. It's very useful just having even a little knowledge of this. But I'm going to have to a little bit oversimplify it just because we don't have the time. Okay, so hopefully it's a little bit more in depth than what you already know, but it can't be as in depth as it could be because we don't have time. So that's the disclaimer. And it's also good to know that there's some amazing books, if you're a reader, about this topic. The one I really like is called Mind in Tibetan Buddhism by Lati Rinpoche. It's a really good book about low rig, or awarenesses and knowers. Another one is Buddhist Psychology by Geshe Tashi Tsering of the London Center. So Geshe Tashi Tsering, and the book is Buddhist Psychology. Yes, he was in London. Now he's at Saramay. Yeah. So,
can I just ask
Sure.
a question? Because I read a little bit. And
Sure.
I see the words cognizer.
Mm-hmm.
Cognizer, can you explain to me? Is the one that
Cognizes. Yes.
cognizes?
What is a cognizer? It cognizes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Knows.
Is that it?
It knows.
Knows.
It knows. Yeah. It knows. Yep. So yeah, unfortunately, we don't have standardized words yet. But yes, a cognizer is a knower. Yeah, a knower.
Always a person?
No. Yes and no. Yes and no. That's a longer conversation. Yeah. Yeah.
Just everywhere.
Yes, exactly. What is a person? Right. Go back to the beginning. Yeah, so more on that. So what we're going to do this session is, there were actually a couple of requests for some review on minds and mental factors, and some requests about clarifying conception and perception. So what we're going to do is a little bit of a step backwards and and review for some of you and new to some of you. And then in the last session, hopefully we'll be able to take a leap forward and go into the 7 types of awareness again in more depth. So the last session session, I became aware that a lot of this was really new to a lot of you, and so we need to kind of go back and do some groundwork. And even those of you that have studied a long time, there was just a couple pieces missing that are important enough pieces that we should just go back and make sure we're on the same page. So is that okay? Just a little bit, we're going to review some of this stuff that you might already know, but kind of just really plant it. We want it to be clear enough that you could explain it to each other and it would make sense. Yeah. So until we're to that point, we shouldn't move on. Okay. So first of all, let's talk just a little bit again in general about when Tibetan Buddhism is explaining the mind, and all other forms of Buddhism talk about the mind in similar ways. Our particular framework either goes Lorig, which are Tibetan words that mean awarenesses and knowers, or Sem Semchung, which is minds and mental factors. So we kind of have two main ways to talk about the mind in Buddhism, these two. And Lorig is mostly talking about the 7 types of awareness, which we talked about last time. It's talking about what are objects and what are object possessors. And they're really talking about, in a way, the quality of the mind and the progression of the mind. Yeah. Sem Semchung, or minds and mental factors, is talking more from the perspective of how the different parts of the mind hold objects and the relationship between the different parts of the mind to each other. Yeah, generally speaking. So in Lorig, we talk about the difference between perception and conception a lot. It's mentioned a little bit in Minds and Mental Factors, but you get a more in-depth presentation here in Lorig. So there are many things to know about them, but the ones to really hold on to are these main differences here. So perception, according to Geshe Rabten, is receptive and non-reflective. What do those words convey to you? Receptive and non-reflective.
Seeing something without judgment.
Exactly, seeing something without judgment. Yeah, so not non-reflective in not appearing back, but non-reflective in not necessarily opinionated reflecting on it. Yeah?
Isn't it automatic that we see something and immediately we have
Yes,
perception?
we have, well, this is the question. And the other question is, do we need to? Yeah. So we're just kind of like laying out what is going on in there, because it's not like we're having one thing at a time. We're having multiple mental experiences simultaneously. Some of them are perceptual, some of them are conceptual, some of them are mistaken, some of them are unmistaken. All big balagant, right? Big mess inside, all the time. And some of it is useful and some of it is not. But if we can kind of peel out what's going on in there, we can take some more control. So perception gets a little bit too much credit in the sense that people assume a perception is accurate. Yeah? Just because it's direct and unopinionated doesn't mean it's correct. Direct doesn't mean correct in this sense. Direct perception, when we're talking about the 7 types of awareness, does. But here, perception is just engaging in its object positively through affirmation directly. Yeah? And perception is something that we want to develop so that our perceptions are all imbued with bodhicitta and realization of emptiness, so that then all of our conceptions are sort of, I guess, beneficially tainted with those things until we no longer need conceptions. Okay, so conception is the place where we do our work, even though conception is by its nature mistaken. Conception by its nature is mistaken, but that's not to say that it's wrong. So just kind of bear with me. There's an interesting thing to discuss here, that conceptions can be mistaken but not wrong. Okay, so conceptions are responsive and reflective according to Geshe Rabten. So they're responding to what perception perceives. So there's the perception of something and there's the response to it. Yeah? They're by nature having some sort of opinion, push, pull to them, whether it's in words or not. So a conception is often thought of as a thought, And the thought is often thought of as your words or your internal narrative. But that's not the only kind of conception there is, right? We can have lots of concepts that are without words. Babies have conceptions before they're verbal, okay? So, but it's the part that is responding. Does that make sense? Responding, okay? So it engages in its object negatively by elimination. So what it's holding in its mind is everything, is by process of negation. So it's not actually holding accurately what the thing is. It's always mixing it with what's called a generic image or a meaning generality. It's like a snapshot in its mind. So there's the objective object out there and the subjective projection on it. And conception mixes them together and thinks that they're the same. That basically what is there and what you think about what is there are the same. Yeah, which is how we live our life, right?
Where does emptiness comes into display?
Into subject and object. Wait for it. Yep. Yeah, but it's a very good point, right? Because what is subject and object? Is there such a thing as subject and object? And yes and no. Yeah, yes and no. And that's where it's tricky, right? Because when we start talking about conceptions mixing this idea of subject and object, that it shows actually the fundamental problem in our way of thinking altogether. But it's very interesting to think you need to use this mind that thinks in order to get to the mind that is just directly experiencing. So some shortcut texts say we're going to a place of no thought. But that's a dangerous way of framing it, isn't it? Because we have like no thought all the time when we're sort of vaguing out. Yeah. People who are really high aren't having particularly conscious verbal thoughts, are they? Doesn't mean that they've achieved no thought, right? Yeah, so, but when you come across these terms, especially in the Zen tradition, know that they're referring to something quite profound, but it's easy to mistake it and to think that you're supposed to meditate by pushing away all the words in your mind. That's not what's being said. Okay, so more things about conception, I guess, that are important to know is that it is mistaken because of its appearance, but not of it because of its mode of existence. So to say that something's mistaken means that the way it looks to your mind is incorrect, but not that your opinion about it is incorrect. So things can look inherently existent, but you not believe that they're inherently existent. Yeah? And the example that's given is if you're looking at a snowy mountain with sunglasses, the snow mountain looks blue, but you don't believe that the snow is blue, do you? But it does look blue, right? Yeah, exactly. Or the horizon looks like a line, right? Curve, right? So this is an interesting way to look at it, though, to realize that there are examples in daily life that we can think to of things appearing one way, but us not believing how they seem. We can go to a movie and wear 3D glasses, and it looks like the things are coming at us, but we don't believe them. Right? But a little kid might and be like, right? Or if we're a bit tired that day, we might forget, I don't know. But you can have an appearance without belief. But what we're talking about is that all conceptions are appearing to us in an incorrect way. Everything we see, everything we hear, everything we think about comes to us in a mistaken way, but we don't always believe that mistake if we're trying to train ourselves on the path. Yeah. And even some mistaken things can wind up being helpful because it's a progression along the path. So we can start with something that's a conceptual thought that's not totally perfect, but is moving us in the right direction. Can you think of an example of like a good teaching that is, in the realm of method, not the realm of wisdom, just a good teaching where there's a little bit of the taint of grasping at true existence, and yet it's still a useful thought process to have?
Yeah.
Repeat the question. Are there any conceptions that are useful? Despite them,
For me, the rebirth
rebirth.
is conception.
Suffering.
Suffering, very good. Yes, good, yes.
Suffering is just empty of
Exactly. Yeah, suffering is a very good one. Suffering does not exist in and of itself as it seems, not inherently, and yet we take the concept of suffering to trigger the determination to be free from samsara, to trigger compassion. Yep.
Using the mind.
Yep. Yep.
We use the mind.
Yep.
But we have to use it in order to get above it.
Yeah, in order to get to a deeper layer of it. Yeah, absolutely. We have to use the mind.
Or dual language
Mm-hmm.
in order to get to the undual.
Yep.
To the non-dual.
Yeah, exactly. And, and again, this is the analogy we always talk about, but, think about when you're very good at something, there is a lot of thought and practice that went into it before you became good and fluent. Yeah, same with language or music or art, right? So, I remember when I was a little girl learning to play the piano, and I'm still terrible at the piano, but there was one song that I practiced over and over and over again because I loved it so much. And then there came a point at which I no longer needed to look at the music, and I no longer needed to think first this note, then this note. I just played. Right? This feeling? But it wasn't a magic ability to just play. It was born from lots and lots of conception of first this, then this, then this, then that. There was a lot of that. Repetitive, really deep, considered thought before it could just flow. Yeah? So this is what the mind can do and what we're trying to do in analytical meditation. Yeah, in analytical meditation, we're going over a series of thoughts so many times that they become the way we think, naturally without effort. Yeah, but naturally is an interesting word, right? Naturally means comes through easily without effort. Spontaneous, right? But we do a lot of things naturally that are not natural, right? Or that are not good or not useful. It just means comes easily, yeah? Yeah, naturally angry person, naturally loving person. The naturally just means comes easily. Yeah, it doesn't mean good or bad per se. Could be good or bad, right? So when we look at conception, what we're trying to realize is that something can appear in an incorrect way, but we can still label it correctly. And if we label it correctly enough, it will stop appearing incorrectly. Yeah? Exactly. Everything is appearing incorrectly so far.
How you don't fall into this kind of big rabbit hole.
Yes. How do you not fall into a rabbit hole of, what is real?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you try to use good and bad and to try to go on the path, then this drops everything from under the ground. So
Yep.
it sounds a little bit like a trap.
It can be, and it's hard for our
Deal with it.
yeah, and it's hard for us to commit to something that we know we might have to let go of. Yeah, it's very hard for us to really hold an opinion strongly, hold a core value strongly, live by it, and know that at some point we might need to adjust and change it when there's more information. But this is what we're trying to do.
Is it, we talking only about opinions or about everything?
Everything, but opinions is an example, right? So just bear with me, right? So if we're using something like an opinion of what is a good way to be a friend, right? What's a good way to be a friend? All right, so when you were a little kid, a good way to be a friend was to share your toys, right? Share your toys, that's a good friend. Not hit each other with the toy. Well done. Right? Right. And, so that was the criteria for good friendship, right? Sharing and being nice. Yeah. And then you got older and it was, something more upgraded than that. It was maybe being inclusive, not just sharing your possessions, but sharing your time and your energy and not being so self-centered and actually listening to other kids and, collaborating with play in a more direct way, blah, blah, blah. We get older, it means what? Supporting each other through joys and tragedies, marriages and deaths, births and everything, right? And, things sort of change over time. And we allow that as very natural process because we saw it modeled in our parents and we saw it modeled maybe in our older siblings. But for us to say something about the spiritual path, that's harder because we haven't necessarily observed people going through a process on a spiritual path unless we have a teacher. And maybe not even a super teacher, but just kind of a regular teacher who's a few steps ahead of you, to see them evolve over time and knowing that your evolution is possible because of having witnessed that. Yeah? So what is it to say, okay, I'm going to do a meditation on emptiness, even though I don't totally understand emptiness? For us, not being totally sure about emptiness means we are prevented from doing the meditation, isn't it? Or even compassion. Say, I want to meditate on compassion. You sit down, okay, compassion is good. I should do it. Yeah, but I mean, we often don't start until we feel like we're perfect, until we perfectly know what to do. And the approach we're trying to take here is, if you commit to it, even imperfectly, the parts that need to adjust will reveal themselves. Yeah, it's the same as the approach we take in debate, right? In the Tibetan debate system, you just take a stance, yeah? And you just argue from that place and see if it's true at the end of the argument. And if it's not, you're like, oh, good, that one's not the right one. Okay, I'll argue from this position now. But when you make the position or the opinion about you, then you can't let it go when you're wrong. Yeah? So this is an interesting thing to play with conception, to say, here is my most sophisticated conception about this idea, and so I'm going to repeat it and work with it until more information is revealed to me through classes, through experience, through whatever. Yeah, and in this way we gently progress, which is why we have the 4 tenant schools, right, that talk about emptiness from the different perspectives, from coarse to subtle. Because to say, okay, intellectually, I like the middle way consequence school, the prasangika view, it makes sense to me, doesn't mean I've realized it, does it? Probably we're not even great exposition, right? We're barely hanging on to the idea that we're not the center of the universe, yeah? Experientially, yeah? I mean, in our inner conversation, in our inner narrative, most of the words start with I, me, how can I, when can I, right? It's mostly is all about us in there, right? And so you have these progressive steps of when you really have realized emptiness from the great exposition school view, that is very powerful, and you naturally see the next more subtle level coming and know you need to go there. So we want to use conception in the right way, to not be afraid of training our mind through thoughts that may not be perfect yet. Does it make sense? Yeah, because it's better than where we were. It's more wise than where we were, more effective than where we were. So very slowly we work on these things, but when we talk about why do we look at these two, it can help to understand that this is all related to the conversation we've had many times about the 5 paths, which is, where is this mind going? Where is this mind going? Yeah, we want it to be going to Buddhahood or enlightenment. So how do we get there? It's through a series of conceptions turning into perceptions. Yeah? Of conceptions that are mistaken but not wrong, turning into perceptions that then imbue other conceptions. Yeah? So you're training up this, it turns into that then imbues these ones. Right? Okay, you with me so far? Ish?
Trying to. You work back and
Exactly, you work back and forth.
yeah.
Exactly.
You end with the right.
Exactly.
Yes, so you're supposed to have like a perfect perception
Mm-hmm.
and a perfect conception?
Your perfect conception turns into a perfect perception. Yep, and then conception is no longer needed about that thing. No more need, just how it is, right? Like we know how to walk now, we don't have to think about it. Yeah, you could think step 1, step 2, am I balanced, but then you eventually laugh at yourself and go, I could just walk without thinking about it. Yeah, so I mean, you could like inject conception back in, but it's no longer necessary. So how to frame this is to first look at, when we have the path of accumulation, the first path in the Mahayana tradition, what we have is uncontrived, right, unfabricated, real determination to be free, and bodhicitta, right? So determination to be free, that's what we sometimes call renunciation or the intention to emerge. Bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, the good heart, the aspiration to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. Yep, that. Those two things are coming spontaneously without effort, imbuing every other mind. Yeah? So you're walking to the supermarket with bodhicitta and renunciation. You're talking to your friends with bodhicitta and renunciation. But you don't have to stop and think about it. You don't have to stop and conjure it up because it's just naturally present, imbuing all of your other conceptions. So how do you get to it? How do you get to the first path? Yeah, exactly, right? You study and you practice.
Which is what we do.
Exactly.
Hoping that we get there.
Exactly. Exactly. You're having a thought on purpose. Yeah, if you have a thought on purpose often, it becomes how you think. Yeah?
It's training the mind, really, just taming them.
Yep, training or taming the mind, right? Training or taming the mind. So this path of accumulation, it's a pathway awareness. It's not a place, right? It's a pathway awareness. It's a shift, like a cognitive shift that is now changed you. And it doesn't mean you can't change back into the selfish bugger you used to be, right? You know, we can slide back, but after a certain point, we don't slide back. Yeah, once it's reinforced enough, we don't slide back, and that's what we really want. So what we want to be doing is to think about what is our approach to happiness and suffering, because we want the determination to be free, to be a real uncontrived determination to be free. We understand that suffering is no good. We don't want it. It's born from karma and disturbing emotions, right? We're all on board with that. But how do we deal with happiness? Do we use happiness to trigger the determination to be free? Or do we use happiness as a great relief and an excuse to disassociate, give up, blob out, become frivolous, and use up our merit? Right? So this is the tricky thing with renunciation, is that we're probably doing okay with taking suffering on the path at least sometimes. Yeah, think, oh, this suffering, this is in the nature of samsara. Oh, this bad experience, this is my negative karma ripening. I need to purify and create more positive karma. Right? We're doing pretty well, generally speaking. Yeah, do you agree? But then happiness, how do you use happiness to reinforce the determination to be free? Any kind. Take any kind of happiness, yeah. Tal, yeah.
You can do it by wanting to share it with all,
Wanting to share it.
First of all.
Yep.
To reflect on everyone, be happy, be happy, be happy.
This is a good way of using happiness for bodhicitta. How do you use it for renunciation?
And you can say, wow, I'm so thankful that I'm happy now. I know it will pass.
You know it will pass. Very good.
But
Yes.
I can enjoy the moment knowing not to cling to it.
Yep. Freeing yourself from attachment to it by remembering impermanence. Excellent. Yep.
And I think that also layman has moments of clear seeing, and these are such sweet moments.
Of clear seeing. What do you mean?
Of the mind being clear and calm.
Yep.
And renunciated for a second. So I think that it happens if you sit alone and for long times, and if you understand that this is the way you want to live,
Yeah.
if you can live like that, this is also an option.
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. Yeah, when you're in a deep meditation where your mind's natural clarity is there, when your mind's natural calm is present, there's a deep satisfaction in that place, which can remind you of what is possible and make you motivated to seek it. Yeah, for sure. So it's having these experiences, but using these experiences. You know, there's a famous T.S. Eliot poem where it says, you had the experience but missed the meaning. Right? We've had all sorts of experiences, but haven't framed them in a way that is productive yet. We can backtrack, right? We don't need any new suffering. We can use the suffering that already happened. But, to really think, am I taking the meaning of this experience and bringing it onto the path? Yeah. So the uncontrived determination to be free in bodhicitta, imbuing every moment, becomes a very good engine to make you want to continue the path, right? For us, everything is hard until we get to the path of accumulation. We're in the hard part. That's what we have to remember. Right now is the hard part. If we have bodhicitta and renunciation, that becomes its own engine, its own fuel for progress, because we so much want to be of benefit to others. We so much want to get out of samsara that it's much easier to prioritize. Yeah? Right now it is hard for us to prioritize the spiritual path. Do you agree? Even though you like it, but you know, right? Like for example, yeah? Absolutely. I mean, for example, I wanted to see Geshe Kelsang Wangmo teach. I think she's amazing. I really look up to her. But my mother's here. Yeah? Right? Gotta look after your mom, right? It's a rule, especially here, right? Right? I gotta show her things. I gotta feed her things, right? And enjoy her visit. And of course, you know, there's many ways to look at it, right? There's a way to take that experience on the path to awakening, or to feel it as an obstacle, right? It in and of itself is neither good nor bad, but you know, it's very easy to frame it as this is blocking my progress, or this is interfering with my path. And that's often what we do with the daily life minutia, is we think that I would love to practice Dharma, but I have to do this first, forgetting that this first thing can be the very path itself, and that remembering bodhicitta and renunciation, when you've studied like you all have studied, it only takes a second. You don't have to sit down and meditate, right? You can think, okay, I have to go to the grocery store. Bodhicitta, click. Renunciation, click. And turn the ignition of the car, right? It doesn't have to be a whole long thing, but you reorient intentionally on purpose every time you can remember. Makes it so much easier to do this. And that's where you get these quotes by Lama Zopa Rinpoche, like live with compassion, die with compassion, experience happiness with compassion, experience suffering with compassion, work with compassion. It's not just a beautiful poem or something nice to think about. It's that if you reinforce these ideas in every situation, they will stick. Yeah.
See it, they will not reinforce. You don't remember.
You don't remember to reinforce.
Only words does, in my experience,
Sure.
does not help at all. Like you have to sit. I have to
Sit.
sit.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to sit.
Remember to, like before it comes naturally, to see everything that comes to me
Yeah.
is in the way.
Yeah, no, you do have to practice. And no, you do have to practice sitting, but I think that it's a mistake to think that you only remember through sitting.
Not only.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, but it helps, absolutely.
For me, it's the main thing that helps me.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I see that it becomes
Yeah.
more natural.
Yep. Remembering on purpose is our greatest challenge. Remembering on purpose. Yeah, but the thing is that you will remember more and more often the more you just show up, right? Show up to your cushion imperfectly, show up to class imperfectly, show up to a Dharma conversation imperfectly. Just keep showing up. And to look at, you know, I'm trying to do this instead of, right? Like instead of the samsaric things I use to soothe myself, I could use something that will bring deep satisfaction and soothing, and it will be very uncomfortable for the first 5 minutes, and then I'll be so happy that I did it. Yeah? If you do a YouTube binge, it's pleasant the whole way through until the end and you're tired and your eyes hurt, right? If you decide to meditate, it will be totally annoying and uncomfortable for 5 minutes, and you won't feel like it, and you'll be grumpy and impatient and distracted, and then you'll let go into it, and it will be nice. And even if it's not perfect, when you get up, you will feel better, and you will be reoriented to your path.
It's like waking up.
Yeah. Yeah, it is like waking up in the morning. You're like, no, I don't want to get up, right? Yeah, exactly. I will feel better if I hit the snooze. I will feel better if I sleep 20 more minutes. You really believe it every morning, don't you, right? You really believe this will help the day if I just wait 20 more minutes. But if you'd just gotten up when you first woke up, you'd probably be clearer and less foggy, right? And when we've had to get up, when we haven't had a choice to hit the snooze, it's hard for a few minutes. It is. And then we're fine, right? And we forget, right? Because the temptation of the samsaric mind, it's just a stronger habit. It's just a stronger habit. But sleep is a good one because that is what we're battling every day, the temptation to fall back to sleep rather than wake up. Both, specifically and really sleep, but also just all the ways during the day that there's a moment of truth where we could go more awake or we could go more asleep, and we usually choose more asleep. It's normal. It's how we've been from beginningless time. But if we can try and choose wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, yeah. Just for a few more minutes of wakeness. Yeah, the staff meeting, just a few more minutes of awakeness. It is building to this. Yeah.
That sometimes I really don't feel like practicing at all because there's a long day.
Yeah.
And so when I practice in good, at the end I talk to myself and I tell myself, please remember tomorrow
Yeah.
how good it was. Please let me,
Yep.
Sometimes it
Remind
happens
yourself.
because, yeah, I want to plan it somehow,
Yep.
because it's not that easy.
Yeah, no, what you're saying is really true, that remind yourself how good it was afterwards so that you remember next time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have
Like
to
swimming.
remember.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
The opposite, reminding yourself, this felt terrible. Sleep
Yeah.
extra 20 minutes.
Yeah, right. Now I feel like I'm hungover and I wasn't even, yeah, absolutely. So what we have then is you're on the path of accumulation. You're really doing quite well. If we had bodhicitta, and we can have bodhicitta by the end of this life, we can, yeah? Even if you're old, even if you're sick, and no one here is that old or that sick. But even if we were, you could get bodhicitta in this lifetime. Yeah, you could get Buddhahood in this lifetime if you really got your act together, but who knows what kind of karma we've got and what kind of obstacles we've got. But I think that we can. I think we can get bodhicitta. And how amazing would our life be and our next life be if we came in with bodhicitta? People couldn't offend us. People couldn't hurt us. We wouldn't hurt and offend other people on purpose. We would be out of competition. We would be not so fragile egos. Right? Imagine if we had started our life with bodhicitta. We can start our next life with bodhicitta if we get it now. Yeah? So this is achievable, and we need to think of it as achievable. And if we have this, the rest is going to flow because you're going to say, I need Buddhahood for myself and for others. I need Buddhahood for myself and others again and again, which means you must realize emptiness. Right? If you want to cut the root of samsara, if you want to clear away the negative seeds, you must realize emptiness. And so, what do you need to realize emptiness? Calm abiding and special insight focused on emptiness. Right? Calm abiding is the ability to have single-pointed attention, shine or shamatha, perfectly and stably. Special insight is your analytical abilities developed to their utmost extent. Bringing them together is going to be hard, so work on them separately. Yeah? Work on them as two separate skill sets, which you don't have to wait for them to be useful. They will be useful the more you work on them. You will be a better worker, a better conversationalist, a better lover. You will be a better everything with more concentration, right? It's in your best interest, both samsaric and otherworldly, right? Now and in the future, concentration is good. You won't forget your lessons. But if you had bodhicitta, it would be much easier to focus on single-pointed concentration. Some people say you need single-pointed concentration before you can get bodhicitta, because we're too distracted, right? So work on them both, chicken or the egg, just in case. Work on them both. But the drive to have single-pointed concentration needs to be from a place of bodhicitta. Otherwise, you will just love your concentration so much that you'll forget about sentient beings. Yeah, it'll be hard at first until it's not. Then it'll be beautiful and magic and amazing, and you might achieve different levels of clairvoyance and just forget that the whole point was enlightenment. You'll be like, wee, I'm magic, right? Right? It's happened, right? We've probably met some charlatans that had some amazing power, yeah? there's all sorts of New Agey groups and all sorts of groups of other traditions where the leadership has ridden the wave of some old karma and has some interesting clairvoyance or some interesting energy, and you're so sucked in because they're charismatic and powerful. But if they don't have bodhicitta, who cares, right? Who cares? Cool, whatever, it'll wear off. It's not worth our time. Yeah. Shows what the human mind is capable of. That's kind of cool. But, right? Thumbs down. Okay. So, you need, to realize that the path of preparation is achieved through conceptual calm abiding and spiritual insight focused on emptiness. You don't need the direct realization of emptiness yet. You just need an accurate intellectual understanding and really good focus. More than really good focus, but calm abiding focus. This is helpful. Intellectual understanding is incredibly powerful. Intellectual understanding is the step before perception. So we do need to study, but our study is not pointless intellectual exercise. It actually is leading to something more than just being a smarty pants. Yeah? So it's good to know. So when you have single-pointed attention and special insight focused on emptiness, conceptually you have the path of preparation, which has 4 levels. And after about the 2nd level, you no longer fall back to the lower realms. Yeah, in your rebirths, you're not going to do any backsliding. So that's super good news. And you haven't even achieved emptiness yet.
That's nice, Candy.
Yeah, right?
The 10 boomies,
Yes.
where do
10 boomies.
way to go?
Yep. Wait for it. Boomies are coming. It's fun to say boomies, right? So I know what you want to get there. Right. Okay, so path of preparation, you're preparing to realize emptiness, right? That's why it's called path of preparation. Path of accumulation, you're accumulating merit and wisdom, accumulating mental momentum, accumulating energy, right? That builds into the critical mass for the next cognitive shift. Does it make sense? You're accumulating momentum. Yeah? Then you're preparing to realize emptiness. And with your repetition of this calm abiding and special insight focused on emptiness conceptually, you get, eventually, perception, direct realization of emptiness. That's the path of seeing. You're an Arya being, and you're really getting work done. Right? You're getting tons of work done. Because now your purification is like superpowered.
And you know that you are.
You will know. Yes, you will know.
Okay.
You will know.
And you don't actually analyze emptiness anymore. You don't need the analytical part now that you have.
Yes, once you're here, yes. Yes, once you're here, you don't need the analysis in the same way. You might, like all things, you might need to kind of prep yourself in some way. So something like compassion, we are already on board with, we already understand. But to meditate single-pointedly on compassion, we can't just do it, right? Quick, compassion. We have to think our way into it. No, I'm saying for example, right? So for example, compassion that you already understand, can you meditate on compassion single-pointedly just right away? Go. No, you need to think your way into it, right? You need to think of what is it, what are the disadvantages of when it's present, what are the advantages of when it's present, how is the world suffering without it, how could the world be better with it, blah, 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 many thoughts until you're like, compassion, the resonance of compassion, you're in it. Then you can hold it single-pointedly. It's not like you didn't know those things before, but you had to think your way back into it because it's not as stable as it could be yet. So it could be that you need to think your way into it and reconnect with the perception, but the path of seeing is actually just the first meditation. The second one, you're on the path of meditation. Yeah. So this is the shortest of all the paths. Yeah. These ones could take lifetimes, a life, several months, depending on the person and the effort. Path of accumulation and path of preparation. The time is not set. But path of seeing is just one session. Your first direct perceptual realization of emptiness. Your second one is the path of meditation, repeating your realization of emptiness. Yeah. And so here is where Tal was saying the 10 bhumis, or the 10 grounds. The path of meditation has 10 grounds. And if you're interested in this whole series, request teachings on Salam, or grounds and paths, because this goes into more depth with these. So if you're interested in going into the 5 paths in depth, ask one of your teachers to teach that. Salam. But anyway, here we have a repeated sequence of what are called uninterrupted paths and liberated paths. And generally speaking, what's happening is that you meditate on emptiness, only emptiness appears, you're clearing away and purifying eons of negative karma, and then you're like out and about living your life. Right? And when you're out and about living your life, you're accumulating merit, right? You're accumulating more merit, and you're also still having the appearance of inherent existence, but you believe it less and less and less. Yeah? So every time you're in meditation, you do perceptually directly see emptiness only. That's it. That's what you see. That's what you are one with, that new non-duality. But that doesn't mean that then when you're out of meditation, you keep that appearance. Still things appear in the wrong way. You just don't believe them. Yeah. It's only when you're actually a Buddha that you can hold the two, seeing the relative deceptive truth that samsaric beings see at the same time as holding ultimate truth, the emptiness of inherent existence. Yeah? So you're just repeating, and as you go through these 10 grounds, basically you're removing what are called afflictive obscurations, right? The first 7 grounds. Afflictive obscurations, or the obscurations that came from afflictions. And then the last few grounds, you're removing the obscurations to omniscience, or the cognitive obscurations. And those are the imprints left by grasping at true existence. So they equate this to garlic and the smell of garlic, right? So you can get rid of the garlic cloves, but it's still stinky in there. Yeah, so as you're moving along, you're chucking out cloves of garlic, right? Afflictive stink, chucking them out. And then say they're all gone, it's still a bit like, whew, but they've been in there a long time, right? And then when you remove the smell or the imprints, right, you have what's called the path of no more learning, or Buddhahood, enlightenment. Okay? So this is how to look at perception and conception, is that we're using both of them all through the path, and they operate in different ways. Yeah? They operate in different ways. One of them is more responsive and reflective and less correct, but more useful for us at our level, and that's conception. The other is more direct, more likely to be accurate, though not always, and is not so opinionated. It's not processing so much. But once it becomes something like bodhicitta, it's incredibly powerful. Because imagine every little thought riding along with it is something like bodhicitta, or the realization of emptiness. Riding along or coloring it. How powerful we would be, how undistracted, how kind. Does it make sense?
Kind of like turning our mind against itself.
Yeah, against its ignorance anyway. Yeah, we're turning our mind against its ignorance anyway. Using the ignorant mind to kill the ignorant mind. Yeah. There's a quote which we use in Tantra, actually, but works here, which is a termite born from wood eating the wood. Yeah. Yes. A termite born from wood eats the wood. Yeah. It's usually used in a tantric context, but it can work here too. Yeah. Okay. So that's enough for kind of the overview of these guys, I reckon. Do you have any questions before we have a little break? Do you guys do you understand this? Yeah, you get it? Yeah.
So the beginning of the path, the essential perceptions are as inaccurate as the essential perceptions, right? Or that they are how would I say,
The sense perceptions.
more, we can't lean on them, but there is a
Yeah.
measure here.
Yeah, the sense perceptions are seeing things directly, but the misconceptions appropriate, and respond to them so automatically with disturbing emotions that they're not particularly useful.
We
Yeah,
can't lean on perceptions
exactly.
at the beginning
At the beginning, we can't lean on perceptions, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good way of framing it, that generally perceptions are more direct, but at our level, it's not like we can lean on them because they've been co-opted by the dark side. Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, cup of tea, unless there's any bits to clarify. I'm going to erase all this, so if there's one that you're confused about, please ask. Take a picture? I took a picture, yeah.
Engages in its object negatively.
Yep.
Elimination.
Yep.
I read the way of elimination, but I didn't understood it well. Actually,
Yeah.
I don't feel it happening.
What does it mean, yeah, to say that things engage their object negatively by elimination? Yeah.
You have to go a long way to see if it's not there.
Yeah, it's not that, not that, not that, not that. So this is all of the things that are not that. Yeah, it's weird. It's very weird.
I already have an image of an apple.
Yeah.
Don't I go immediately to the image and see it's that and not go and say, no, it's
Yeah.
not the other things?
I mean, it all happens so quickly you don't notice.
So I do say
Yeah.
the other things before I go to the image.
Not in words, right? So if you're seeing, yeah. So if you're seeing an apple, it seems like, aren't you just seeing an apple? And perceptually, you are seeing an apple, but you're not calling it an apple, right? So perceptually, it is just direct, right? Your eyes are apprehending form and shape. Yeah, that is happening immediately. But your conceptions are negating all non-apples. Yeah. Which is why conception is problematic, because it's immediately in this kind of dualistic thinking that mixes the thing there with your projection on it. Is there a time in which you can see an apple in your hand and not have it mixed with your generic image of apple? You know? Each apple is different. Do we think of them as different? We're referring them back to all of our memories of apples and the possibilities of apples and the memories of, blah, 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 right? And the snapshot in our mind of appleness isn't changing moment to moment. But we think of it as the same thing as this thing in our hand, which is changing moment to moment and is different to any one we've ever seen. Which makes sense in terms of trying to live in the world, recognizing patterns, but is not helpful because it's reinforcing our dualistic thinking. Yeah. So anyway, good news and bad news.
So we have a break till what time?
Yes, we have a break.